was trained in the 1990s in the Netherlands as a photographer, documentary photographer, I would say, kind of classic, but always with an interest in history. And somehow over the years my practice developed into one that is about research and experimentation, trying to think through photographs, through practice, but in an academic context. This is also kind of the nature of my presentation here for you today. The ambiguity of the title of the event allows room for that. So it's more a demonstration of what working through photographs can do than an argument or an analysis at this stage. That also has to do with that it's this is part of a long-term investigation that is really sort of just ongoing, even though I've been at it for a long time. But I picked it up after finalizing a PhD about photographs in Uganda that I'll, no, I don't refer to that in the video. So that is it, and I guess the main research question under everything I do and have been doing is how to keep things real while working in multiple and at best partially connected contexts. The past and present, there and here, them and us, are somehow always there. And how to facilitate multivocal narratives resulting from these contexts.
It doesn't have sounds that you can see actions.
Eurostar, January 30th, 2020. Dear Dr. Julien, it is time for an update prompted by an encounter between your past and my present. In this present, I find myself on a train towards Cambridge. Barely a week has passed since arriving back to the Netherlands from East Africa, where I met people around the photographs you made of Batwa on the northern shore of Lake Kivu in 1947. Tomorrow, I'm expected to deliver an illustrated lecture at a symposium that aims to contribute to the decolonization of the visual library on the African continent by telling our tales through ambiguous photography. You know me well enough by now to understand that I would prefer to think in terms of the particularity of photographs rather than the too multifaceted and confusing notion photography. In addition, it can no longer come as a surprise that I consider any photograph to be ambiguous, because I think of it as a non-human agent in encounters, with a meaning that is constantly in flux, rising from both its production and its use. I decided to shape my contribution and this letter as a series of chronologically ordered vignettes leading up to the recent encounters around your photographs as a prelude for future engagements in which your legacy is compared to other studies concerning Batwa and used in the production of present-day imaginations of Batwa history. In 1947, your first post-Second World War journey to Africa was an exceptionally long one, wasn't it? From your notes and the letters to your wife, I know that you traveled through East Africa for half a year. From late November to mid-December, you were in the Belgian Congo colony, where you tried to engage with groups of Batwa as part of your serological blood research and general interest in so-called pygmies. Apart from blood samples and other statistical data you produced during these first weeks of December 1947, black and white negatives in the formats 9x12 and 6x6 centimeter, 35mm Kodachrome slides, and 16mm film. In one of your notebooks, I read, "The son of a famous chief summons the Batwa to come. They are dressed more or less similar to the Wahutu. Some are big, majority dark-skinned, yet typical pygmy types. Their fear was filmed by M. Pierreux in Goma. And, most remarkable, the Batwa co-migrated from Rwanda to Kivu. They are imports. They have withdrawn because they do not feel related to the other migrants. There are two types. Firstly, the forest Batwa, who are similar to the Kivu ones. Secondly, domestic Batwa. I call them tradition Batwa. They are unrecognizable for me while I measured thousands of them. I assume that the them you refer to in the last sentence are pygmies at large. The Batwa are both typical and unrecognizable. The ambiguity in your notes is striking. The grand narrative of the Batwa is that they were chased out of their forests. A booklet on the national parks of Congo that I assume you kept from the 1947 journey and is part of the documents connected to your legacy at the Netherlands Photo Museum, at least as ambiguously mentions that national parks were installed to protect the fauna while the impact of human presence increases, and that it had been the Belgian king's initiative to implement this protection, while the territories which have been declared reserves have been chosen because the full surface of the national parks is unfit for colonization. Natives were migrated outside of the national parks, while exceptions were made for the pygmies, whose musical performances were described as a rare art experience for the Europeans. In 2006, I was in East Africa as a tourist, visiting a friend who migrated to Uganda. I made a trip to Kigezi, the Ugandan province bordering Rwanda and Congo, including the Kivu region. The area is, as you know, stunningly beautiful with its green hills and crater lakes. At the shores of Lake Bunyonyi, the water body you saw while traveling to Kivu, several resorts were under construction. Among mostly big signposts luring tourists in was an unassuming, almost humble one. It said, Edirisa, window, and led to a canteen on the lakeside belonging to an organization set up by Michal Loga, Slovenian by birth, as part of his Masters in Development Studies. Ederiza as an organization was trying to work with and contribute to the lake community through education, crafts, and tourism. I thought of myself as a documentary photographer mainly concerned with Dutch culture. I nevertheless started to consider how to explore the culture shock I experienced and proposed to Micha to set up what I would now call a comparative study of things that matter involving school children in the Netherlands and Uganda. It all happened more or less as planned, and Micha and I stayed in touch. The end of 2012, I celebrated with Micha, other friends and strangers on an island in Lake Bunyonyi. Among the strangers were some Batwa who kept to themselves, except during the drumming and the dancing. Someone told me that the Batwa could do the Bachiga dances, while the Bachiga could not do the Batwa ones. Meanwhile, Micha had shifted his focus to responsible tourism. On New Year's Day, there was a meeting concerning the collaboration between Ederiza and the Batwa of Ramahano. At the end of the meeting, I inquired whether it would be okay for me to come back with photographs made of Batwa decades earlier. It was. I planned to return in April. April came and first brought me to Bohoma, where a doctor bought a piece of land bordering with the Impenetrable Forest National Park and created the Kellerman Foundation to support the impoverished Batwa community. Part of their activities was the Batwa Experience. I did the experience with an aunt, a mother, and their cousin, daughter, who had been volunteering on another side of the country. We were told that the experience was created to preserve traditions for a young generation of Batwa. These traditions would otherwise get lost now that forest life no longer existed. The experience, however, also generated income for the foundation and the Batwa community connected to it. We climbed up a hill with our guide and were stopped by rangers who were watching gorillas with another group of tourists. The animals, unlike the Batwa, did not have to stick to the borders of the national park and could occasionally be found on its outskirts. When the experience continued, we were introduced to medicinal plants, saw how fire could be made, honey harvested, and what Batwa houses used to look like. We could not escape taking part in a staged hunt and attempted to handle bow and arrow. The Batwa danced for us, and we listened to the story. I did not have access to your negatives, films, or notebooks at the time, but brought prints of about 24 lantern slides that were placed behind a tab labeled Batwa. I assume that you occasionally use these slides to illustrate your lectures. Owen, one of the Ederiza guides, brought me to Hakayaji, a Bachiga village located slightly lower on the hill than Ramahano. Together with about 24 Batwa, we sat down on a slope with a stunning lake view. The prints were handed out. It was chaotic. Owen tried to translate what was said, but having a conversation about what was seen was impossible. Then a man, possibly the oldest person present, recognized another elderly man on one of the photographs. Owen translated. This man is not from here, but he used to visit us when I was a child. He was from the other side of the volcano. I run a platform on photographs in Uganda. Early 2007, I published an essay by anthropologist Stan Franklin about the photographic representation of pygmies on it. Here are a few quotes from the article. There is a long history of posed pictures of pygmies in which they are made to act out our imagination of what we think they should be. As with many other African people, the pygmies put up a fierce resistance to the forces of colonialism. Many were taken as slaves and many were killed as a consequence of the European discovery of Africa. However, this resistance has been written out of the historical record in favor of a romantic fantasy of the eternal hunter. An evolutionary antiquity has been created with the pygmy as a symbol of an archaic form of life which we all once lived. The political history of the actual people of their oppression is simply brushed aside. It is with great shame that I have to say that my own discipline, social anthropology, has been as culpable of this denial of full humanity as any academic discipline, and it has also played a crucial role in spreading this insidious myth out into the world of popular culture. In fact, I could go so far as to say that academia as a whole has played a constitutive part in the continued colonization of the pygmies. End of the quote. On the 29th of December 2019, I returned again to Lake Bonyonyi with Canon Griffin, a Ugandan artist who I've been working with since 2011. He knows me and my way of working and speaks Runyankole. This time I brought prints of all the photographic material that I thought might be relevant in relation to the Batwa, including a compilation of digitized Batwa film clips. During the next day, it turned out that Owen was booked to guide a group of German tourists who came for a forest walk with the Batwa of Rahamano on the 31st. This offered an opportunity for Canon and me to first just be around before discussing your photographs and film. Micha offered to host up to 5 members of the group at Ediriza to facilitate a proper conversation about the materials. The plan was to speak with the representative of the community, now a local council chairman rather than a chief, and to select the members of the community who would join us together. We gathered more or less in the same spot as 7 years ago. I instantly recognized the man who identified the person on one of your photographs 7 years ago among the crowd. He introduced himself as William, still appeared to be very vital, and I started looking forward to speaking with him later. Before walking up a narrow path, the Germans were given the chance to ask questions. What are the religious views of the Batwa? They wondered. How is their family organized? The children's schools? These questions echoed the ones you asked at numerous campfires over half a century ago. It crossed my mind that either the questions of European visitors did not develop since early 20th century, or the influence of the way you and your contemporaries reported on your investigation persists in shaping what visitors bring in when touring Africa. Could the same be said for the pictures you, I, and the German tourists produced more or less every step of the way? Do all these frames build on certain preconceptions which lead to misunderstandings, or should we call them ambiguities that are hard to avoid? Upon our return to the village, there were dances, followed by the exchange of pleasantries and goods. After the Germans left for the next item on their itinerary, we all entered the pub. Goods were unpacked, money was handed over. The goods did not include salt or tobacco, the items you would donate in exchange for people contributing to your cause. From several bags, clothes, shampoo, plastic toys, as well as items that were hard to identify in terms of their use emerged and were distributed among the people present. Then Owen introduced me and the purpose of my visit. William would not be able to join us to Ediriza. He had responsibilities he could not leave behind. With Chiabazanga Nora, Ntezichi Kedras, Biarugaba Robert, and Biraro Johanna, we went through the pile of photographs and looked at the film twice. There were giggles, admiration, astonishment, and wonder. To be Batwa is simply something one is born into and exists with, we were told. Nothing more, nothing less. To translate the conversation still caused difficulties. Not because it was too chaotic, but because Owen and Canon did not always agree on the translation I should be given. January 1st, we showed the film in Hakajaji's pub. The responses were in line with those given a day earlier, in a more intimate setting, and the conversation continued outside with a group of interested elders who confirmed William's positive identification and the migration stories it relates to. Canon and I moved on from Kigezi to Kigali. Micha had put me in touch with the leader of a group of urban Batwa and given me the warning that Batwa, as part of the post-1994 genocide policy, no longer exists in Rwanda. That same evening, we met John Paul in a restaurant. He told us that the past year had been a hard one for the community. Their main source of income depended on a clay field that had been closed off to allow the expansion of the city's golf course. But we were welcome. There was a fixed fee for visitors to tour the ceramic filter factory that included dancing by the Batwa. The next day we met close to the factory. Next to it there was a market where pots in any size, some figurines and other ceramic products were sold. I bought a little man holding sticks. After showing your film compilation to the people identifying as Batwa and working in the factory, and subsequently witnessing their dance to a song about leaving their forest, someone remarked that it was good to see this history, but that I would actually like to show their present through film. The little clay man, John Paul told me, depicts the father who successfully demonstrates the power of unity to his 3 sons by asking them to break individual twigs and a bundle of them. On the bus ride back to Kampala, the figurine was damaged. I first tried and failed to repair him with superglue. A friend tipped me to use undiluted wood glue. This worked, but I am too impatient, causing further damage and all too obvious repairs. The process makes me wonder how the clarity of the metaphors that emerge from the figurine of the little man relate to the endless ambiguities surrounding past and present day depictions of the realities it originates from. Yours, Andrea. P.S. Rereading this letter just before delivering it, I noticed that I left out the perspectives these vignettes led to. In 2 weeks' time, I will continue this stream of thoughts at an event about remembering across cultures. While in April, I will continue to work with Micha, Robert, Johanna, Nora, Kadras, John Paul, and Dushime Emmanuel, who made the little man. Your photographs will be one of the inspirations in developing visualizations of Batwa history in a Batwa house at Ediriza. I hope that you are as excited by all this as I am.
Any questions?
First of all, I enjoyed it, thank you. Couldn't work out the timeline. It seemed like perhaps you were talking to somebody who maybe wasn't alive anymore or something.
Yeah, he isn't alive anymore.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it was your letter to somebody who had been a social anthropologist or whatever in a previous period?
Yes.
Yes. And
he made the historical material. So, sorry, you know, these are the things, I think they are, well, Kirsten briefly mentioned it, and then, so yes, the Dr. Julien, the letter was addressed to. So letter writing is anyway my way of, or a way that I use to keep things real, even if the addressee cannot respond because he passed on. It is a way of acknowledging how he shapes my voice. So it's hard. So this is the 8th letter in a series. So that's why he also already knows me quite a bit, or I assume he knows me quite a bit. And yeah, well, where was I going with this sentence? Yeah, that's just.
I got it. Thank you.
It will come up.
And the people around the table who were kind of looking at camera, were they looking at the filming from the earlier period?
Yes. So the insert there.
Yes, yes.
So they were looking at that. Yes, and it was 2 cameras. So it was Canon, the Ugandan artist who was there, and me. We both filmed. I filmed the projection, and he filmed into the room. And so he sometimes moved to film the projection, and that's when you shift to my view. Yeah.
What's the time period? I guess that Julian did the video where the dancers.
47.
Yeah, 47 years.
No, 1947.
1947. And then
Yeah, so he worked on the African continent from between 1932 and 1962, and it's quite a story. So he was actually he had a PhD in chemistry, but used it to do serological research, which is sort of the predecessor of the current DNA research, and physical anthropology. Initially, including the taking of the measuring of skulls and noses. At some point he left that, but the serological research he kept on doing until 1962. And he used missionary stations and colonial infrastructure to do all this. That made it possible for him to do it. So it's very easy sort of to dismiss his practice and the photographs connected to it, because now it's so problematic. But then there are also the photographs as agents themselves, and what can we learn through them by adding perspectives to it. I mean, that's how it fits in today. Yeah.
I'm just saying, just to contextualise my question. I work in museums in terms of workforce development, but also work with collections. And this word decolonisation seems to be gathering pace in this, where it's being applied. I just wondered, in relation to your practice, what does decolonisation mean in terms of
adding perspectives? I think allowing these making space for ambiguities. So it's less dismissing one perspective as well as making it relative in relation to others, and therefore allowing reflection on it. Things I've been bringing Julian material also to other parts of the continent, and there's been quite a number of instances where I find photographs hugely problematic, and then descendants of the people on the photographs are actually thrilled to see them because it gives them access to something that they didn't have before. And in this case, some were really embarrassed by the nudity on the film, while others said, oh, we've always been hearing this, that our ancestors didn't wear clothes, and now we finally get some proof for it. So that's just all there. And I think an important part for me of the decolonization affordances are to open these things up and not jump from one box perspective into another. That makes sense? Yeah. And I think the Netherlands has a different, but not less problematic relation with colonial history than the UK, of course. Very different in relation to Africa, but where we were not directly involved in colonization, though we were in slavery. But we were, if you include missionary work.
I mean, as a photographer myself, I'm very aware of the gaze itself being a colonizing relationship. I'm just wondering if you're conscious of that. Who is behind the camera? And what is in front of the camera?
Yes. But at the same time, I'm trying to not have that awareness shut doors, but keep them open. I think that's, and so in my research on photographs in Uganda, I've always been working with Ugandan artists and photographers to make my gaze and the gazes of the that were behind the historical photographs relative, and then think through about them.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So is it safe to say that you are rather enforcing that gaze rather than decolonizing it?
Oh, I hope not. I hope not. If it looks that way, then there's something wrong with this presentation. So I hope I'm making it, as I said, I'm making it relative. I'm placing other things next to it. You know, when I started working with this collection, there were two positions in the Nederlands Photo Museum where the Julian collection is. One was dismissing it because of the problematic anthropological practice it came from. The other was admiring him for his qualities as a photographer, saying, oh, these are, going in a formalist, taking a formalist approach to the photographs. Oh, they are so beautiful. And the middle ground of questioning was not there. And that's where I'm trying to be. To be critical to his case.
Going
No,
back.
it's fine. I'm sure my time is up.
Yeah.
Yeah, being critical to his case, but not shutting the door.
Being interested, generally your time, interested in the, I like the way you presented everything, and the video illuminate the artifact here. And you mentioned what was not recorded by the that's the life. The dance is shown, but
The performances, the performative aspect.
when you showed it to the community, was there a conversation about what is missing, as you mentioned here?
In Kigali there was,
Yeah.
but it was formulated in terms of their present everyday life more than yeah. Yes. But yeah, not really actually. I think. Yeah, only in that way. But the communication is really hard because of language, because of vocabulary. So I'm really looking forward to working with them on these visualizations for this Bapa house, where the photographs are not something to talk about, but something to transform to visualizations initiated by them. And also only one of the sources, not the source.